Don't fight the change. Embrace the change and the innovation and let it lead you to the next generation of your career, of what you do next. Because if we have to continually add value in this changing world, and if you're not learning and keeping up at the pace of innovation and keeping yourself relevant, then you might as well just, retire.
Welcome to the Agile Digital Transformation Podcast, where we explore different aspects of digital transformation and digital experience with your host, Tim Butera, Content and Community Manager at AgileDrop.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm joined today by Brian Fitzpatrick, the CEO and chairman of Qredible, the world's first enterprise quality management ecosystem that's purpose-built for high-risk industries. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the evolution of digital transformation and how businesses can efficiently and successfully keep up with it. So, Brian, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you here today with us. Anything to add before we dive into the questions?
No, I think you've captured it. It's great to be here, Tim.
Awesome. Happy to have you here, as I said, and I think that the topic is great. And obviously, you have a lot of experience in the field. So I want to start off by you sharing some of your own experiences and like stuff you've seen of how technology and digitization have evolved, and maybe also what is kind of the main characteristic of the stage of digital transformation that we are currently in.
Absolutely. Well, I've had the benefit of being around for over 50 years in this earth. So I've seen quite a lot of change from a technology perspective. And I always kid that I started my tech career at a little tiny tech firm called EDS. And I kid about that because at the time it was the second largest technology company in the world. And it really gave me the opportunity to see how big companies operate. And it really was almost like the first formation of the SaaS industry. We used to call it the application service provider, but that was really the precursor to software as a service, because software as a service, what really paved the way for that was the internet era of the 1990s. And as that really started to advance, it created major changes that impacted technical design and business operations. So I like to say it gave us the ability to go from monoliths to microservices where we are today. And, if you look at sort of that evolution, we started out with big giant mainframe systems, right? And even in my last industry, I spent 30 years in the mortgage tech side. And the largest mortgage servicing system that's still operational today in that space, servicing most of the largest institutions in the American mortgage market, is a mainframe system.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you think about it, we really started with these monolithic architectures, built as a single tightly coupled unit of technology where everything was, in one giant code base. And then we really started to see a shift towards more modular and distributed architecture, and this is where I've written a lot of white papers on about microservices and component-based architecture and enterprise service buses. And so that was really it. We started to migrate to that component-based development and a resurgence of interest in changing of this software development methodologies, which led us really to cloud computing and serverless type environments. I mean, I remember my first tech companies, we were constantly worried about, did we have enough computing power? It was like, we got to get more pizza boxes. We got to get more computing power in the data center. We got this new client coming on. So the business had to constantly be forecasting with the sales team and be ready in time to be able to take on a new client. So when we got to really, cloud computing, it really started to modify things. And it's sort of all of that sort of paved the way for what I think the main characteristics of the current stage of what has led to now digital transformation. And, I think that's where your question is, what is sort of the main characteristic of that, in the current stage? But I think there's more than one. I think there's foundational technologies that are leading the way to enable true digital transformation, and also things like everybody's talking about machine learning and AI and blockchain and all these great things. Well, guess what? There had to have been an evolution of technology to become the foundational underpinnings to be able to move these things into rapid and agile development. So the first thing is really the adoption of agile methodologies and DevOps practices has really influenced software architecture, which from a business perspective, like as a CEO that's constantly trying to drive new innovation, it's given us this opportunity for flexible iterative approaches to design and development, and even in DevOps to be able to respond quickly. So not only develop the technology quickly, but move it into practice quickly. So that's been a very important, I think, because I started out, of course, in the waterfall software development lifecycle methodology, the traditional way, but then being able to move to agile has been really, really critical. And then I think data-driven architectures. So what's in, everybody talks about big data, but if you don't have the right software architecture to enable large-scale data processing and analysis, then, it's not even, going to work. So by using, even like we've seen the emergence of NoSQL models like MongoDB, CouchDB, and even being able to handle large amounts of data with JSON formats and Bison formats, and where each document contains these nested structures. So that has really created a lot of innovation around data. Now, the reason I'm talking about these is because, like, let's talk about AI. AI is not going to work if you don't feed it data. So
Mhm.
you have to have the right underpinning of architecture to be able to amass that data, gather the data, amass the data, and then feed it to those engines. And that really gets into another foundational underpinning, which is integration interoperability. So I'm a big believer in the API economy. I've been talking about that for years because, when we've moved away from these monoliths, we're able to create microservices, and we're able to create microservices, which instead of having this big giant monolithic technology, we've got these little individual pieces of functionality that operate almost as its own little tiny microsystem,
Mhm.
right? And having a library of those functions that can easily be accessed through API gives the business such great flexibility in generating revenue and implementing new technologies, because the old day, it used to be rip and replace. We literally would have to go over and blow up some big monolithic system and replace it with another big monolithic system. And, and that was expensive, risky, time consuming. So now we can do that in a series of microservices. And the other thing that I'm seeing in a very, very big way, particularly in the industry we serve, which is the sort of the nutraceutical, dietary supplements, cannabis, CBD industry. Security and compliance is so critically important in that industry, but in many industries now that are highly regulated.
Mhm.
Because now not only do you have to have this functionality in a digital transformation, but it has to drive compliant activity. So it has to take your business standards and your operating procedures and standards and your compliance rules and actually put them in action. So like in my industry, for e-commerce, you can't get away, for example, with using Shopify for an e-commerce system, because that system will allow you to break the law very easily. So, in our industry, like, we have a purpose-driven e-commerce platform that has all of that compliance and security built in its DNA. So it's very, very important. And I think that you can't slow down your business because you're in a rapidly changing compliance driven industry. And in cannabis world, I mean, it's like there's things coming out every single day in
Mhm.
CBD and nutraceuticals. It's constantly changing. So you need that agility. And I think that the last thing, to me, I'm a big believer that we're living in the conceptual age right now. Right. So I'm a Daniel Pink fan. And, Daniel talks about the conceptual age, where you got the three A's: Asia, automation, and abundance, right? Because you can either outsource it, right? So we're constantly figuring out things, business processes that we can outsource, but we're also looking at automation first, which is the other A.
Mhm.
So think about how automation has changed so many industries, like LegalZoom.com. Before you have to call an attorney now, you can go to LegalZoom.com and start a corporation. So these two A's, which are squarely focused on this left brain linear thinking, has driven this high emphasis on right brain activity because we're living in the age of abundance, which is the third A, which means you can't even buy a toilet brush today without it being the Martha Stewart collection, or buy a toaster without it looking really cool on your granite countertop. So we're used to seeing design at the forefront. So user experience, UI, UX is very, very important.
Mm.
And if you don't have the right architecture to support a better user experience that includes responsive design and multiple devices and platforms that are able to access your technology, it's not like even on mobile, it's like we can't just develop for iOS anymore, right? We got kiosks, we got big screens in our cars, and that's going to continue. So the ability to access technology at the point of use for a consumer is very, very important. Now, I talked about those five foundational things. Notice I didn't really talk about blockchain and AI very much because it's not that I don't believe in them. I'm a huge believer in those technologies, but without these core underpinnings, forget about those technologies. If these things haven't evolved to the point we are, we would never be able to take advantage of artificial intelligence. And I'm a big user. I started implementing it in my last company in a very, very large way, generative AI. But if I didn't have the right cloud first architecture and all those tools and all those formative types of things and staying on top of that movement, those technologies would never work.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's very much that evolution, as you said at the beginning. And I'm also really interested in what are blue ocean opportunities, if you can explain those maybe, and why are they relevant to the current stage of digitization?
Sure. Well, I think the blue ocean strategy really is based off of a book by W. Chan Kim and Renee, forget his last name, Mawborn, I believe it is. But it's a best-selling book. And, it really, this blue ocean strategy is something I really believe in because all of my technologies have been about finding that blue ocean opportunity. And a blue ocean opportunity is really one whereby, you're sort of changing the game by
Hmm.
making the competition somewhat irrelevant. So you got all these companies over there that are, knife fighting in this very competitive space for a limited, market share, and everybody's doing it kind of the same old way, where you have to in the blue ocean, you just have to sort of beat the competition by competing in an existing market space that essentially you're changing the rules of how and the way you're approaching this and approaching a market. So you need to have the right technology architecture and infrastructure to be able to accomplish this. I mean, a great example is I remember when, these Stitch Fix boxes would start appearing on my, my doorstep. And I say to my wife, "What is this Stitch Fix? Why do we keep getting these boxes?" And she'd be in these, really cool looking outfits. Stitch Fix didn't invent buying clothes on the internet, but they innovated in the fashion and retail industry by combining personal style with data science, right? So without that data science integrated into e-commerce,
Hmm.
they wouldn't have been able to create this opportunity. So they essentially they didn't really create, it's not like they were creating a totally new category of clothes on the internet. They were creating a new segment market opportunity within a big category for people to buy clothes online, but do so in a way that was very different than everybody else because this was tailoring or finding using sort of these technologies, data science, and to find your best look, right? So I think that's a good example. And and we're doing that in our company as well. And without the right technologies, it's going to be hard to take advantage of those things and have a leg up on the competition.
So a blue ocean strategy would definitely be very important to a business or a person who wants to, stay relevant, stay competitive among all the changes with especially with the faster and faster pace of change.
Absolutely. And we're living in an age where I mean, I know it's cliche to say that that we were in this sort of fast pace of change, but it's true. I mean, it's happening. I mean, just in the what I just described from my mainframe days, the computing power that was in one of those mainframe systems to now what, we can even see in that we're holding in our hand, in a
Mhm.
cell phone. It's it's amazing to really think about. So we are in a very, very fast pace of change, and in order to, keep up with that, we need the right sort of technology architectures and infrastructures to be able to drive a strategy that is differentiated from the competition.
Mhm. How about on the people side? So, in terms of people and culture, what do we need to do to kind of stay relevant and keep up?
That's a great question. It's, one of the things I have to tell you, I'm constantly talking to my wife about this. When I hear people say, and there's people, friends or family that we'll talk to, like, oh, this technology stuff just drives me crazy. I'm too old for that stuff. I don't want to, that's just like I'm thinking in my head, and I don't always say it out loud. I've gotten better about that, but you you better retire right now. I feel like saying like, and some of these people aren't that old. They're still in the job market. So I think that the most important thing is that it's so critical in this fast changing environment to be able to embrace change and innovation. I remember in my last company, talk about digital transformation. That in order to digitally transform anything, change management is a critical aspect. It's almost like you have to change and lead the mind of the people that are working there or using the technology. And I remember we did a big implementation at a mortgage company, and this lady came up, and I was sort of observing the project team, and she said she's going to quit. This is just all too much. And I said, why? And she says, well, I'm used to having this manual loan file, this 700-page loan file in front of me. You've taken that away. And really, if you think about it, like the first step was to scan that loan file and create a PDF blob, which was basically you've all seen them, the 700-page, document that, you're scrolling up and down to find what you need. There was pushback at that. But that was the first stage of change. And then the next stage was using our technology, machine learning and OCR type technology as a data picker to feed the machine learning engines to actually classify the documents. So take that 700-page blob and break it up into individual documents. This is the appraisal. This is the mortgage application. These are the pay stubs, et cetera. So you can just click and find it instead of getting seasick going up and down. Well, then the people said, well, where's my blob? Where's my big 700-page document? I'm like, we're making it easier for you. You don't need to search anymore. Yes, but I'm so used to this thing. So, and then the next phase was I'm thinking to myself, well, geez, just wait till we get to the next phase, which was pulling data out of those documents and automating the audit decisions that they were manually checklisting and doing. So, then we really got pushback because we're like, and it just reminds me so much of I was flying back and forth to Florida in a couple companies ago. And, of course, since I was flying so much, I was flying first class. So I go right up to the first class desk, and it was a small airport that I would fly into all the time in Florida. And I got used to seeing this guy. So I know his name, I know his kids' names, and so he was always smiling and happy. And one day I walk up, and the guy literally looked like his dog just passed away. So I said, "Hey, like Jim, what's going on?" And he said, "That's what's going on." And he points to a kiosk, the ticket kiosk. And I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. I know they're rolling those out here." And he says, "It's not cool. You don't understand. That's my job right there." And he's like, "And I'm going to lose my job." And I said, "Jim, you are looking at this all wrong." I said, "What do you know about that machine?" He goes, "I don't know anything about it other than it's going to take my job." And I basically said to him, "Before you go home today, ask your manager for the manual to that machine. Take it home, study it, read it, learn everything there is about that, then come back and tell them that you know everything there is about that machine." So it was a couple weeks later, I come back and he's not there, and I'm like, "Uh-oh, I think I got him fired," right? And then I was like, maybe that was bad advice. And it was like 2 weeks after that, I saw him, and he was all smiles again, and I was like, "Oh, Jim, I thought you got fired," you know? And he's like, "No, Brian, guess what? I'm now managing these machines." I'm training the
Nice.
other staff. I got a bump in pay. I got a new job. So it really speaks to me and to about the lessons of continuous learning and skill development. Don't fight the change. Embrace the change and the innovation and let it lead you to the next generation of your career, of what you do next. Because if we have to continually add value in this changing world, and if you're not learning and keeping up with the pace of innovation and keeping yourself relevant, then you might as well just, you know, retire.
That was a great tip and a great example, Brian. And I just have one final area that I want to touch upon before we start wrapping things up. And, throughout this conversation, we've used a lot of these buzzwords that we hear and see so often during these discussions of digitization and digital transformation. And I'm wondering what you think about business buzzwords, and if you think that they tend to create, artificial and kind of not completely justified hype for certain technologies and certain novelties.
Yes, it's interesting because buzzwords just have always driven me crazy. And in fact, it goes all the way back to when I was at EDS. I remember I before I was starting as a sales manager in a particular division, they wanted, as part of my training, they stuck me at one of the largest clients, which was a large bond trading organization. And the managing director of this company, was essentially the CEO, was very unhappy with us because this thing we were rolling out was just not going well. So EDS sticks me in this as part of the sales training, which was great sales training, by the way, because you learn, if you're not setting expectations properly in the sales process, what happens. And clearly that's what was happening. So EDS was famous for buzzwords. It's like they had a dictionary of these things.
Mhm.
So I'm a young tech executive, right? And and he says, so what are you going to do to fix this? So I said, well, listen, I talked to the team. What we're going to do is we're going to use a COM object to pull files out of the mainframe through vsam file formats, and then what we're going to do is we're going to convert that into a blob, and then we'll create a data record which we'll attach a GUID to. And this guy, I thought his head was going to pop off. He had this, like, he was this big tall guy, and he had this southern accent, and he goes, "I have no idea what you are talking about." He said, "All I know is none of this stuff works, and I'm very unhappy. So can you speak English?" And it really, it really gave me a lesson very early on in my career, that when you're talking to business people, they don't care about buzzwords. They don't. I mean, you talk about AI, it's like, "Oh, great." They want to know, what is this going to do for my business? How is
Mhm.
this going to transform my business? What kind of impact is this going to have? So I think it's a great way of saying that we really have to be careful about these buzzwords, because it really creates a gap between understanding and solving the business problem and trying to sound smart.
Mhm.
So I think technologists lose that because this stuff just rolls off, and then the other problem is you see companies using these buzzwords because it makes them sound smart and makes them sound on top of things. And they're not even using some of this technology. When you dig into it, it's like, so where's the AI?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, well, we're not really using it right now. So I think it all it does is it creates confusion and really sort of a hype that is unjustified. Remember, as technologists, we have to solve business problems. And if we're not solving business problems, or we're not solving a problem for a consumer, then the buzzwords don't matter.
Do you maybe know the comic Dilbert about
Yes.
development? I,
Love it.
I always like I don't follow it that regularly, but the one episode that always stays with me is when the boss comes to him and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've read a lot about this blockchain thing, and we need to implement a blockchain." And Dilbert is like, "Oh my God, I think that he doesn't know what he's talking about." And he goes, what color do you want that blockchain? And the boss is like, I think mauve has the most RAM.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a great way of really smoking people out when they start talking
Yeah.
about, just ask a second question that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with it and see how they respond. I love it.
Brian, this was an amazing conversation, amazing tips, amazing insights. If people would like to learn more from you, maybe, or connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
Absolutely. You can find us at Qredible, Qredible.com. And through Qredible.com, you'll be able to follow us on LinkedIn. You'll be able to get onto our newsletters. We have a podcast of our own. I actually just started a new newsletter called Fits on Life, and it's really more about my personal journey, things that, you see, I have a lot of stories and, just stories that I tell and just things that are relevant to business and life. So look for us at Qredible, Qredible.com.
Okay, very cool. Thank you again, Brian. This has been really fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
And well, to our listeners, that's all for this episode. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out our other episodes, you can find all of them at agiledrop.com/podcast, as well as on all the most popular podcasting platforms. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and colleagues.